Yes.
Telephone,
I figured
keys.
that's why we have to have one of these that gives us something to do with the hours in our day. And calling it. You have to keep your landline at home so you can call your telephone and find out where it is.
Bingo.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, that's why I had counsel.
I just want to make sure I cut it off because I'm waiting on a call from my daughter. And she always finds the time to call me right when I'm speaking or in prayer meeting or something, you know, and I just don't want to come. Well, Doug asked me if I'd come talk about gardening. That's the only thing I know to talk about. I mean, that's what I do with my life other than farming with animals. I live here in Locust Grove. I live over on LaGuin Mill. So if you've passed by LaGuin Mill and seen a llama and thought it was a long-necked horse, which people do, that's where I live. And I have 8 puppies, and I started bringing one tonight for a door prize, but I think it's for Roxanne. I had a great Pyrenees, and I love him. And I decided to find him a wife, and I found him a really good wife. And after 3 years, they decided to start a family. So we had 8 puppies this year, and she's just a great mother. For her first set of puppies, she is just, so if you run into anybody who's looking for a great Pyrenees herd dog, send them to me, because I've got them. And I don't know what I'm gonna do with 8 dogs if somebody doesn't come. But, they tell me I can sell them, so we'll see. I just bought a few plants, and that was just to give me something to, you know, as a visual to talk about. I've been a gardener since, since he said, like I said, when I left Clemson. Funny thing about being a gardener, sometimes you get into things when you don't mean to. I know a lot of people who never meant to have a garden, who have probably one of the best gardens. I never meant to get into horticulture. I came from a farm. I grew up on the farm I live on now. And my whole life from about 12 years old on was how to get off that farm, just as soon as I could. I'd lived my whole senior year in high school waiting for the day I'd go off to college. I mean, I never wanted to come back. And when I left that farm, I was not going to come back. That was not it. I would never, ever farm again because I was tired. I was really tired. I was my daddy's helper. Well, you'd never say never, and I've learned that. I went off to school in biology and chemistry well, actually in pre-med. And things worked out well. I got married, and you know, that didn't seem to be, back at that day, something you could do. So I said, I got to do something in life. Got a biology and chemistry degree and absolutely no chance of getting a job with that. So I got to go to graduate school. And I kind of wanted to go to the University of Florida. That didn't work out. But Clemson offered me a chance to come to horticulture. Now I have to tell you, I went to Shorter College, and that was liberal arts. I didn't know what horticulture was. And I called a friend of mine who was at Clemson, who went short also, and I said, Melvin, what is horticulture? He said, honey, it's just a study of cultivated plants. It's like botany. I said, I love botany. He said, yeah, and they paid everything. It was full scholarship. And they gave me money. And I thought, as much as I could make, more than I made teaching down there. Sure. And I thought, ooh, this is it, study of cultivated plants. So after I'd signed the papers and said I would come, my mother said, I called my mother and I said, Mama, I'm going to Clemson. She said, you're right. Honey, that's the agriculture school. I said, I'm going in horticulture. That's the study of cultivated plants. She said, honey, that's gardening. I said, uh-oh, it's the study of cultivated plants. It's a science, Mother. She said, no, honey, it's gardening. Well, the first day that I went to Clemson, they told me to put on my overalls. I was digging potatoes, and I knew I had made the world's largest mistake. I dug potatoes, and it was all men. There were no women at Clemson. They didn't tell me that either. So I made it, and I loved it. And I did not like the lab like I thought I would. I didn't like anything to do with anything but digging in the dirt. And it was just amazing. My mother never got over it. As long as she lived, she said, "You never like to dig in the dirt." And that is what I like to do. That is where I have found my gift. And so I hope that if you haven't found your gift digging in the dirt, that you'll try it a little bit. So I brought along a few things just to encourage you. I'm going to answer any questions you have. People don't always agree with my gardening, but then that's okay, because I have never seen 10 gardeners in a room where they agree with each other. We just don't agree because we're all working in a different world. If you want a God-controlled world, you become a gardener, because there is nothing you have control of. You decide that it was too wet this year, so next year, I'm going to raise my beds up so the drainage will be good and my plants won't drown. And God will give you a drought like you've never seen. So He gives you 3 years of a drought, and you say, next year, I'm going to put my plants down low so the water will collect and water them, and you will have a summer like we had last year, and you won't be able to raise a squash, a tomato, or anything else that is sensitive to wet feet. So, you're completely under the control of the Creator, because He is in charge of the weather, and you're not. And neither are those people who prognosticate and predict and everything else, the weather. So it's kind of fun. It's always a challenge, and our mantra becomes, next year, I'm going to do it right. And the next year you say, next year, I'm going to do it right. And you spend 50 years saying, next year I'm going to do it right, because it's been about that long that I've been gardening. And you learn a lot of little tricks, and people will say, oh, you've got a green thumb. Oh no, I've killed so many plants that I know what's wrong. I don't know what's right, but I can tell you what I've done wrong. And so I learn. I have a huge compost pile. Matter of fact, I have about 8 compost piles. And I love composting. I love it because you just take the stuff you throw away. I even take the stuff, on Wednesday night, we go to the church to eat just so I can get the stuff that they throw away like a compost pile. They think I'm feeding it to my chickens. But I am feeding it to the compost pile, and my chickens go in there to dig it, and they turn it for me. Peacocks, I have 24 peacocks, and so I have a lot of big birds that come in and turn soil. And while they're at that, they poop a little bit, and that adds to it. And so, I don't ever throw away anything. Eggshells, coffee grounds, tea leaves, whatever comes out of my kitchen that doesn't have meat in it goes in the compost pile. Whatever comes out of my kitchen that has meat in it goes to my dogs, because I have a number of dogs. And so, and nothing is ever thrown away. And my potting soil now is made up. It doesn't come from my compost pile. I'm not that generous. My potting soil goes into my beds. So I would say to you, if you are not having really good success with your gardening, it starts with the soil. Put all your money in your soil, and then beg plants from people. Say, I just love your hydrangea. You think I could come over and get a piece of it? My mother had a piece of yard. It was a piece of this. They never bought any plants. I cannot imagine my mother going to the store and saying, I'd like to have this pepper plant. How much is it? And I'd say, well, it's $1.50. She'd go, are you out of your mind? I could buy 50 seed for that. I mean, she just would never buy a plant in a little pot like this. But they would spend a lot of time working the soil. My daddy dug in that dirt, oh my goodness, to grow things. And then if somebody in town grew some of these for their garden, they would give some of them to somebody else. And they began to get a piece of this and a piece of that. And the yard was made up of a little iris from this person, or a daylily from that one, or a shrub that they found under the bottom where the limb had rooted down. And they had these wonderful gardens. And so the only money they really put into their garden was elbow grease. Very little money ever went to a garden unless it was just to make food, because you just didn't, a few seed you would grow, but you just did not waste money on flowers and shrubs and plants when I was growing up. So I never knew anybody to go and really buy shrubs and plants. I wish you could have seen my first year at Clemson. I was so dumb. I mean, I was so dumb, but I had one thing going for me. Ecology. The interrelationship of us in our environment and plants and animals in their environment was a new science. And Shorter was on the forefront of that new science because of a professor we had.